Hi everyone, I'm Emma, and you're on the Stories by Emma channel. Let's dive into some amazing stories. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and share. Thank you. The last stop. James sat on the cracked pavement of the old bus station, scanning the faces of strangers rushing past. The sun was setting behind the horizon, casting an orange glow over the city. Every day he waited in the same spot, hoping to see her again. It had been 6 months since Emily disappeared, and the silence following her absence felt louder than New York's busiest streets. James had lost track of how many days he'd spent chasing shadows, but deep down, he knew he couldn't give up, not yet. As the city lights flickered on, James' phone buzzed in his pocket. A message from an unknown number appeared. "Meet me where it all began." His heart raced, recognizing the significance of those words. They were the exact ones Emily had whispered to him the night before she vanished. Confusion and hope swirled in his mind as he stood up. Was this a clue? Could Emily still be alive? He hurried toward the place that had haunted his dreams, the abandoned warehouse where their story had first begun. The warehouse stood eerily silent, its walls covered in graffiti, with shattered glass littering the floor. James' footsteps echoed through the empty corridors as he made his way to the center of the building. His breath quickened as memories flooded back. Moments of laughter, love, and promises made. But the darkness closed in around him, and the weight of the unknown pressed heavily on his chest. "Emily," he called out, his voice trembling in the stillness. A rustling sound from the far corner broke the silence, and James spun around, heart pounding. A shadow emerged, slowly stepping into the faint light filtering through the broken windows. "James," a voice whispered, but it wasn't Emily. A woman he had never seen before stood to him, her face hidden beneath a hood. "She's not coming back," she said softly, her words cutting through him like daggers. "But I can tell you why." James' mind raced as the woman spoke. Emily had uncovered something she wasn't supposed to. A secret buried deep within the city's elite. "She's gone because she knew too much," the woman revealed, her voice a mix of regret and urgency. James clenched his fists, anger and disbelief surging through him. "Why should I believe you?" he demanded, though deep down, he sensed the truth in her words. The woman handed him a folded piece of paper. "This is the proof," she said before disappearing into the shadows. With trembling hands, James unfolded the paper. It was an address, one he recognized instantly. It belonged to a powerful businessman with deep connections to the city's underworld. A man who would go to great lengths to protect his empire. The realization hit James like a wave, the pieces of the puzzle slowly falling into place. Emily hadn't just disappeared. She had been silenced. Determined to uncover the truth, James knew this was his last chance to find out what really happened to her. The next morning, James stood outside the imposing mansion at the address written on the paper. His heart pounded as he approached the heavy iron gates, unsure of what lay ahead. He had no plan, just a burning need for answers. As he slipped through the gates and approached the entrance, the weight of the situation pressed down on him. He was walking into the lion's den, but he had nothing left to lose. Inside, the mansion was eerily quiet. The air was thick with tension as James moved through the grand hallways, every sound amplified by the silence. He reached the office where the businessman conducted his affairs and opened the door without hesitation. The man sat behind a large oak desk, his eyes narrowing as he saw James. "You shouldn't be here," the businessman warned, his voice cold and controlled. James' jaw tightened, but he held his ground. "I need to know what happened to Emily," he demanded. The businessman leaned back in his chair, his expression unreadable. For a moment, the room was filled with heavy silence. "Emily was a liability," he finally said, his voice devoid of emotion. "She got too close to the truth, and there are consequences for that." James felt a surge of anger, his hands clenching into fists. "You took her from me," he spat, his voice trembling with rage. But the businessman's calm demeanor only made James feel more powerless. "She made her choices," the man replied coldly. Desperation clawed at James as he realized that confronting this man wouldn't bring Emily back. The businessman had all the power, and there was nothing James could do to change what had happened. "But I can still expose you," James said, his voice quiet but filled with resolve. The The businessman raised an eyebrow, clearly amused. "Do you really think anyone will believe you?" he asked, a smirk playing on his lips. James knew he was right. Fighting this battle would be nearly impossible. As James turned to leave, the weight of his grief and anger almost unbearable, he heard the businessman speak once more. "There's one more thing you should know," he said. James stopped, his heart pounding in his chest. Emily was pregnant, the businessman revealed, his voice dripping with cruelty. The words hit James like a punch to the gut, leaving him breathless. The room seemed to spin around him as he struggled to comprehend what he had just heard. James stumbled out of the mansion, his mind racing with the revelation. Emily had been carrying his child, and now both were gone. The pain was unbearable, but amidst the devastation, a new resolve began to form within him. He couldn't let this man get away with everything he had done. Emily's story needed to be told, and James would make sure the world knew the truth, no matter the cost. Over the next few weeks, James gathered evidence, piecing together the puzzle of Emily's disappearance. He spoke to anyone who would listen, collecting testimonies, documents, and photographs. Slowly, the picture became clearer. A web of corruption and deceit that led straight to the top of the city's elite. It was a dangerous path, but James knew that if he stopped now, Emily's sacrifice would be in vain. With the evidence in hand, James took his case to the media, determined to expose the truth. It was a long shot, but he had nothing left to lose. The story quickly gained traction, and soon the public began to take notice. Protests erupted in the streets, demanding justice for Emily and accountability for those in power. James watched from the sidelines, the weight of his loss still heavy, but for the first time in months he felt a glimmer of hope. In the end, the truth came out. The businessman was arrested, and his empire crumbled under the weight of the revelations. Justice was served, but for James the victory felt hollow. He had lost the woman he loved, and no amount of justice could bring her back. As he stood at her grave, the wind carrying the last remnants of autumn leaves around him, James whispered a final goodbye. He had fought for her, for their child, and though the battle was over, the scars would remain forever.